What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Thursday, so time for another player breakdown. I'm super excited for this one because it's a major decision point for anyone with a top 4 or 5 pick, and it's one that I've struggled with a ton personally. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see other players broken down, put it in the comment section and upvote the ones you want to see the most. So let's get things started off as usual with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which team had the highest pass play rate on first downs. The answer is the Houston Texans. Sawyer Hebbs was the first to get that one on YouTube, and @Hoddard was the first to get that again on Twitter. Today's stat: George Kittle, Darren Waller have each had at least 85 receptions in 2 of their first 5 years. Who is the only tight end to ever do so in 4 of their first 5 years? All right, so for this one, I want to, I kind of do these differently on these breakdowns. This one, I think the best way is to break down each one first and then to do a comparison afterwards. Kind of just came out the best when I was thinking about this video. So we're gonna start off with George Kittle. He's entering his 5th season in the NFL, and while he's technically coming off a disappointing season since he missed half the year, obviously you were disappointed with Kittle after last season if you only got him for 8 games. From a production standpoint, when he was healthy, he still averaged 6 receptions for 79 receiving yards per game and was 3rd in points per game on the season, despite only scoring twice in those 8 weeks. I probably shouldn't need to tell you this, but Kittle is just an absolute freak athletically. He ranks above the 90th percentile in every single athletic measurement, and that athleticism clearly translates onto the field. He's just a bowling ball when you get the ball into his hands, and the 49ers are excellent at doing that. You know, he's not on the Jets or a team that we don't expect to be very creative. A team like the Giants, any New York team is apparently not very creative. 49ers are very, very creative. They're going to get the ball into their playmakers' hands. They do a great job of doing that with Kittle. So he's not going to need to get peppered with 30 targets a game to catch 10 of them. He's going to be very efficient, and when he gets the ball, he's going to be incredible. And when they've, been able to do this, when they've been able to get the ball in his hands a ton, he's had exceptionally high ceiling weeks these past few seasons, and they win you games, right? When you have a wide receiver post 6 for 125 and a touchdown, it's one thing. But when a tight end does that, you're gaining a massive edge. So notable stat lines, that one there: 4 for 108 and a touchdown, 7 for 210 yards and a touchdown, 9 for 149 and a touchdown, 8 for 103, 6 for 129 and a touchdown, 13 for 134, 15 for 183 and a score, and 7 for 109 and a touchdown. These are explosion weeks, and he's fully capable of doing that moving forward. And believe it or not, the upside, it's one of the main reasons that people are not going after George Kittle. The argument that people bring up is that he's obviously incredible, but they just don't throw enough for him to crush. But if you remember, he broke the tight end receiving yardage record in 2018, posting a final stat line of 88 for 1,377 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's first round value for sure, and it came in a season where the 49ers attempted only 33.2 passes per game, which ranked 20th in 2018 and would have been 25th last season. He's already been dominant under limited volume, so you have to think he can do so again. The number one response to this is, well, the offense is different, and more specifically, they have Debo, they have Brandon Ayuk. Those guys weren't there in 2018, so he may have dominated, but he was dominating on the 49ers that had absolutely no talent behind him, so he can do so on limited total attempts. To that I say, I agree for the most part, because yes, in that historic season, Kittle was competing with Kendrick Bourne, a 32-year-old Pierre Garçon, Dante Pettis, Marquise Goodwin, the offensive weapon that is Kyle Juszczyk. Debo and Ayuk are infinitely better than that cast and will absolutely command a larger target share as a result. But we also need to point out that his quarterbacks were Jimmy G for 3 games, CJ Beathard for 5 games, Nick Mullins for 8 games. This season, he'll likely have Jimmy G for a few, but then Trey Lance, who will absolutely be an upgrade over those other names that I mentioned. So the quarterback play should still be better. And also, even looking at their short time together last season, Kittle still did good. So even when the 3 of them, that core of 3, were healthy for their 4 games from week 4 through 7, in those games, Kittle was incredible. He had 10 targets per game. He had a 27% target share. You have Debo and Ayuk, they were only at 13.7% and 14.4%. So it was still Kittle dominating the targets in those games. If you want to, look at something else, you say, oh, he can't possibly have a good target share because those 2 are there. Well, the only evidence we have so far is that that's not the case. And plus, this was with a rotation of like Beathard, Mullins, Jimmy G. So it wasn't just like, oh, he had Mullins in all 4 of those games. No, he had a rotation. There were different quarterbacks, and this wasn't just one guy that was peppering Kittle. So I understand the concerns about volume, and we'll get to why that's an area where Waller absolutely wins in. But outside of this comparison, outside of even thinking about the difference between Kittle and Waller, he's still going to have a ton of targets. So don't be afraid that having Debo and Ayuk there is going to lead to like 4 or 5 targets a game for George Kittle. That's still very unlikely. He is an absolute freak. He is a mismatch for them, and they're going to exploit that. They're not just going to all of a sudden give Debo and Ayuk like 12 targets per game each and just completely abandon George Kittle. They know George Kittle is a mismatch. They're going to exploit that. The number one thing, though, that comes to people's mind when they're not even talking about volume is the injuries. He's had hamstring, hip, ankle, shoulder, groin, foot, knee issues. Like, he's had a lot of different injuries, and they had their largest impact last season, causing him to miss half the season, as I said before. The thing is, we know, if you're watching this channel, you know injuries are highly unpredictable. Players are injury prone until they're not. Just ask Keenan Allen. Everyone thought he was undraftable because he just was always injured early in his career, and now he's barely missed any time these last 4 seasons, averaging 100 receptions a year. Again, football is a dangerous sport. Dudes get hurt. You can't predict injuries, and people are injury prone until they prove not to be. They're only injury prone because it just happened last. We have biases about what we just saw happen. It's recency bias. If Kittle goes out there and posts a season where he's playing in every single week, 17 weeks, do you think the next season people are going to think he's injury prone? No. So you can't just assume someone's injury prone because 1 year ago they got hurt. Also, if we look at some of these injuries that he's had, I think a lot of people assume he's getting injured because of his style of play. So like I talked about, he's a bowling ball, when he gets the football. And so they'll throw him a screen pass, and then he drags like 9 defenders with him for 15 yards. I think people are assuming that's how he's gotten hurt, but that hasn't been the case. He got hurt last season. That major injury was just landing wrong. It could have happened anyway. Just landed funny on his foot. He had an injury in the past. I believe it was the shoulder injury. It was just blocking. Like, these things could happen to anyone. He isn't getting hurt when he's carrying defenders into the end zone. Like, think about that play against New Orleans. He didn't get hurt in that play against New Orleans. It was just incredible. But I think people just assume that's when he's getting hurt, and that's why they assume it's going to continue. So they're scared about the injuries because he has all these types of plays where it looks like he would get hurt, because you and I would definitely get hurt during those plays. But that's not when he's getting injured, and so you can't just assume he's going to get injured in the future. So that is it for Kittle. Again, we're going to obviously go back to Kittle once we do a comparison. That's just like the overall thinking behind Kittle. Let's do Waller, of course, next. So Waller will be entering his 6th season in the NFL and will be 29 when the season starts, so 1 year older than Kittle. But age is not a factor for these two. Don't use it at all, like not even as a differentiator. If you think they're exactly the same, don't be like, oh, I'll go after Kittle because he's 1 year younger. It's irrelevant. There's there's that cliff, of course, we talk about for running backs. When they get to like 28, 29, now we start being like, okay, maybe is this running back getting a little bit old? It's not really there for tight ends, so don't worry about age. So again, 6th season for Darren Waller, although he's only really seen meaningful snaps in these last 2. Over his first 3 seasons, it was 2 in Baltimore, he played 1 in Oakland, and he had combined 29 targets, and then just broke out in 2019. Had 90 receptions, almost 1,150 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then he improves on those numbers. Those are incredible numbers for a tight end, but improves on that last season. Pulls in 107 receptions for just under 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns, even in a season where the Raiders only attempted 34.4 pass attempts per game, 1 fewer pass attempt per game than the 49ers. The Raiders threw the ball less than the 49ers did last season. That volume is just insane on that limited pass attempts. Like catching 107 balls on a team that only threw the ball 34.4 times per game is incredible. And if you think towards this season, those targets aren't going away. If anything, his target competition is weaker. Nelson Aguilar was 2nd on the team in targets last season with 82. Well, he's in New England now. So now their 2nd leading target player is not on the team. Next up, you have Hunter Renfrow, who's fine, but he's like purely a slot receiver. He's okay, but he's not all that talented. He doesn't have that much of a ceiling. He's absolutely not taking the 82 targets or like the 82 extra targets away from Aguilar. Like Renfro's fine, but he's not that great. And behind him, I mean, we literally have Josh Jacobs at 45. Like that is the gap. 145 targets for Darren Waller, all the way down to 82 for Aguilar, 77 for Renfrow, 45 for Josh Jacobs. Now, I expect Henry Ruggs to get more than the 43 he saw last season. I expect Bryan Edwards to see more than his 15 from last season. But how much more than the missing 82 are these guys really going to command? Like maybe they take some away, but they're going to also take some away from some other ancillary players. Like Waller is set up to have another 100 reception season, which for a tight end is nuts. I mean, only 5 other tight ends have ever done that in the history of the NFL, and Kelsey's the only one to have done it twice. And given that the tight end 12 last season had 62 receptions and 3 touchdowns, you're gaining a massive edge every week if you have a 100 reception tight end, which again can easily happen for Darren Waller this season. Like he is going to be the primary read on most every play, and Derek Carr was actually pretty solid last season and should be again this year. Like I know everyone loves to trash Derek Carr, but if you look at his numbers from last season, he wasn't that bad, you know? And so I'm not expecting a huge drop off. It's also not like he got lucky last season. So maybe Derek Carr is just not a terrible quarterback. He's a serviceable quarterback, and I think he can get it done for Darren Waller. As for injuries, no real reason to be concerned. He's been healthy these last 2 years. He's not coming off anything. So an injury to Waller this season is just going to come from a random bad play, just unfortunate luck. So what do we think about these 2 guys? Obviously, both players, I mean, I'd be pumped to draft. Like if I left my draft with Kittle, with Waller, I'm excited. I've got a huge difference maker. Both are real targets for me in that late 2nd round, or if you could get them in the 3rd round, in that range. I mean, you're going to have already a top 5 running back. And so being able to pair one of these 2 with your choice. I mean, if you want to pair it with whatever's left at running back, have 2 great running backs and a great tight end, and just load up on wide receivers, go for it. If you think there's a fantastic wide receiver available in the late 2nd, early 3rd round, you want to pair with the top 5 running back and one of these 2, you can do that as well. It's very, very up to you. You can be flexible in this position and just see what is available in the draft. But I think it's a very, very good strategy going with one of these 2 guys in that late 2nd to early 3rd round range, because just the upside you bring to your roster is incredible. But you are going to have to choose, right? Unless, someone makes a choice for you, like maybe you're only drafting one's available. But for a lot of you, you're going to have to choose. Both might be on the board. You got to pick one. So who do I prefer? For me, this is what it came down to. If we compare the volume and production last season, it looks like this. Darren Waller had 1.2 more targets per game, 3.9% larger target share, a substantially larger share of the red zone targets. That one's actually very interesting. Kittle only had 3 red zone targets in his 8 games last season, compared to Waller, who trailed only Devontae Adams with 22 red zone targets. That's incredible. He was second in the NFL in red zone targets. Waller also ran more routes per game, which we should continue to see because Kittle's so good at blocking. There's definitely going to be a lot of plays where Kittle doesn't run a pass route. And of course, Waller scored more fantasy points per game. Like, everything was in favor of Waller last season. And if we think to this year, what do we expect to change? Well, it's that one concern we did bring up to start the video, was that I think Brandon Ayuk is really good. I think Deebo Samuel, as much as I say Ayuk is better, I think Deebo Samuel is good as well. And so if those two are going to expand their roles in this offense, it could impact George Kittle. And then we flip on over to the Raiders. I mean, sure, I expect Ruggs and Bryan Edwards to not have like a little less than 60 combined targets, but they're losing so much and losing Aguilar that it's like, I don't really expect the target share to be all that different for Waller. But here is the one thing that people will say to that. The only thing you can really say to that is, okay, George Kittle was hurt last year. Maybe part of this decrease in production that we see when comparing Waller and Kittle was because Kittle was hurt. To that, I'll say, well, these are per game numbers. I'm not including the games he was out with injury, but let's just say for the games that he was coming back, maybe those skew them down. So why don't we compare Darren Waller's 2020 season to that of George Kittle's historic 2018? Maybe we're looking at ceiling, was Kittle actually incredibly more dominant in 2018 than Waller was in 2020? And if we compare those two, well, maybe we can say go with Kittle now. But believe it or not, Waller still wins everywhere. He had more red zone targets, a higher share of the red zone targets, a higher overall target share. He scored more fantasy points per game. So even in that crazy season from Kittle, Waller last year was still better, and that's what does it for me. Because again, I don't think Kittle can reach the numbers he had in 2018 if they have Deebo and Ayuk there, because of how good I think those two are, and especially for how good I think Brandon Ayuk is. But when we look at Waller, I think he's going to be just as involved as he was last season. And since Kittle needs to improve on his numbers from 2018 just to match Darren Waller last season, I don't see how I could personally rank George Kittle first. So if I'm on the clock, I will absolutely be taking Darren Waller first. But again, this isn't to say that George Kittle is bad, that he's not a good pick, because he's still a target. He's still someone that I'd be willing to take. It would just be willing to take after Darren Waller is off the board. So that'll do it for this breakdown. As always, if you want to see who else I have listed as a target, as well as who I'm avoiding, their projections, values, risk grades, and a whole lot more, you can see all of that at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all enjoy. If you did, then how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? But thanks for watching.